I was recently having a discussion with a friend talking about Battlefield and whether they will go back to a modern setting in an upcoming title. This was quite an interesting discussion, and it all stemmed from a video that I was watching from Blue Drake. His video will be linked in the description down below. I will be referencing several things that he discussed in that video in this one. Essentially, the base of the discussion revolved around the fact that DICE have gone back to Battlefield 1, and it looks like they're going to be going to World War II in the next title. Battlefield 4 was kind of modern, but it was pretty much futuristic. A lot of the stuff in that game was set in the near future, and Battlefield 3 was the last game that was set as a modern military shooter. Call of Duty has done a similar thing, going to the future for pretty much every single one of its games over the past 5 years, and then going back to World War II with the most recent release. The next games are going to probably be set in a futuristic or alternative sort of universe with weapons that aren't necessarily realistic. Now, the reason this was interesting to me is because I'm looking for a modern military shooter. I want to have a game that has weapons that are being used and vehicles that are being used currently in the field of battle, and I'm really hoping for maybe a link to a current conflict going on, because it just makes the game more interesting to play, and when you can relate to something that is happening in the real world, it's far more interesting. But that looks like it's not going to happen, and there are several reasons for this. First of all, controversy. You can't really link the game to a current conflict just because of the controversy that will surround it. It's very difficult to do so, and that is completely understandable, hence why developers tend to go for settings that are either far in the past or just in the future. They tend not to focus on things in the current day. On top of that, you have the naming rights. Now, this is the main part of the video, and it's something I want to make people aware of. Naming rights are very, very difficult to obtain in games. Take an example like FIFA or PES. These have naming rights for football clubs, leagues, and players. I know it's not the same as an FPS game, but it's a very similar situation that they find themselves in. FIFA have all the rights, PES don't. That makes FIFA a far more realistic game to play, and PES certainly isn't. Whether you like each game is completely irrelevant, it's just an example of FIFA having naming rights and PES not. It's not always easy for companies to get those naming rights. Another example of this is Squad. Squad actually had to recently remove Humvees from their game. The reason they had to do this is because of the naming rights. They couldn't have Humvee in their game, and whoever owned Humvee wanted a piece of that money. They didn't want to have their name all over a game that was selling when they weren't getting paid, and Squad of course didn't want to have to pay for the naming license because they can just introduce a make-believe vehicle. You see it in GTA. How many cars in GTA look like real life cars? They're usually a mismatch of two cars, but they don't pay naming rights. What they do is they just create their own model, and there you go. It's fairly realistic, but of course we would much prefer it if we had real life cars with real life names, but you just can't have that. And that's what makes it interesting for Battlefield. Having a modern game is probably never going to happen again, and the reason for this is simply the naming rights and the controversy that surrounds it. An example of weapons that have had trouble getting those naming rights would be the AK and the MP5, maybe even the Desert Eagle, which was known as the Deagle. It's very, very difficult to have that modern day setting, and that is just highlighted with Call of Duty sticking to that futuristic setting for as long as possible. I'm pretty certain that they've wanted to go back to a modern shooter tons of times in the past, but they can't, and they've been stuck in the future and now back in World War II. We'll see what happens with Battlefield. I'm pretty certain they could go into the future just a little bit with an alternate universe, maybe with weapons that have a likeness to the current ones but just aren't exactly the same. And this of course means that we could see a Battlefield Bad Company 3 game. Some people were like, oh, we're never going to see a Bad Company 3 game again. I know a lot of people want Bad Company, but remember, Bad Company isn't necessarily about the current day and isn't necessarily realistic. We could be seeing a Bad Company 3 game set maybe in 2020 or 2025. That could be very interesting because, like in Battlefield 4, not everything was realistic. We had Rorsch cannons, hover tanks, all sorts of stuff. So this video acted as just a bit of an information video, a bit of an update onto what is happening in the gaming industry when looking at Battlefield and other games like Call of Duty. Will we see another modern game again? I'm not too sure. Will we even see a game like a Vietnam again? I'm really not too sure. Very, very difficult, and I really don't expect to be seeing one in the upcoming years. Probably World War II, maybe as far back as the Cold War we might see some stuff, and then we'll be looking at futuristic stuff where weaponry is maybe 10 or 20 years ahead of where it is at the minute. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this. Are you disappointed? Are you not that surprised? I certainly was disappointed, but not that surprised because I realised licensing is a major problem in video gaming. That being said, it was fairly sad to realise we're not going to get a modern day Battlefield anytime soon. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.